Hi everyone, I'm Tat Young Ko from the Windows Azure marketing team. Today I'm going to talk about Windows Azure and its benefits and show you how you can use it. Let's take a look. Today I'm going to talk about Windows Azure, Microsoft's cloud computing platform, and explain why it's a great platform for developing your apps. So first, let's look at why cloud. To understand this, we need to look at the design principles of cloud computing. At a very fundamental level, this entire concept is one of sharing resources. If we could share effectively, we could stop the waste of resources. All those computers running workloads or applications that are on all the time cost a lot of money, and they require highly paid staff to manage them. And most of the time, they're only using 20 to 30% of the compute capacity that's dedicated to them. So drilling into this, we see that one of the most important points is economics. As this chart indicates, the larger the data center, the cheaper the underlying total cost of ownership is. This is primarily because if you walk to your local power company and say you need to buy a billion gigaflops of power, you get a cheaper price. Same thing with data centers. You get a better deal if you're running at scale. And not only that, but when you run at this scale, you have to automate almost everything, and this automation makes the total cost of ownership cheaper. You can only afford to do this if you're very large. This is a considerable investment. Which brings us to Microsoft. Microsoft offers real-world experience with massive scale deployments that are unmatched, with built apps and services such as Outlook.com, Bing, Xbox Live, and Office 365 on cloud technology. As an example of the kind of reach we're talking about, Office 365 is now used by more than 20% of all enterprise organizations worldwide. There are over 5 billion Bing queries monthly and over 40 million Xbox Live users. So all of this technology has been used to build Windows Azure. So essentially, Windows Azure is a broad stack of services that runs in our data centers globally. Think of the different services as building blocks. These services can be categorized into three classes: infrastructure services, which are lower-level building blocks; data services that provide storage and data management capabilities to apps; and app services, which provide different capabilities to rapidly develop apps, scale, and run apps at a global scale. In a physical sense, Windows Azure is built on data centers across the world. Let's now take a look at the global scale that Windows Azure operates in. We have data centers in 8 global regions across the different continents, 4 in the US, 2 in Europe, 2 in Asia. We also recently announced Windows Azure availability in China. These are gigantic in their scale and operations. Each data center is about 7 to 10 times the size of a football field, and their power utilization efficiency is about twice that of a large enterprise data center. We also have global support with local teams around the world, so you can be sure that you're taken care of if you run into any issues. Windows Azure provides several benefits, and so now let's drill into some of these. The first is time to market. Instead of waiting days or even weeks for IT to procure and provision servers, you can easily provision resources immediately. You can develop and deploy within minutes. Reducing the time to market means that you can get your app out there in the market to your users as quickly as possible. The speed and agility that this gives you also means you can reiterate quickly to improve on your apps. Open and flexible. We realize that you'll want to run a variety of workloads in the cloud. With Windows Azure, we of course provide first and best experience and support for Microsoft workloads, but at the same time, we've embraced other open technologies. In enterprises, Java and .NET are still mostly used, but developers are also using PHP, Python, and other languages in addition. Windows Azure supports all of these languages and more. We provide out-of-the-box experience for open frameworks like Hadoop, web frameworks like WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal. We also provide first-party SDKs for developing apps using Android, iOS, or Windows phones. In addition to the breadth of the platform, it's important to note that using Windows Azure is not an all-or-nothing proposition. You can use most services independently of each other. For example, you could use storage without compute. And what you want to use and how you want to really use it is really up to you. And finally, economics. With the cloud, you're only paying for what you use. This means that you have great cost savings and can achieve great efficiencies. You're saving money for any app that has variable computing needs. For some of you, this also means that you can free up capital from infrastructure investments and put it to other use. So these are the benefits of using Windows Azure. Let's take a look at how you could use it. One way to use Windows Azure is to extend your infrastructure. Windows Azure Infrastructure Services allows you to spin up and tear down virtual machines as needed. There is no hardware provisioning necessary, and you can scale efficiently for your needs. We understand many of you already have line of business apps that are on premises. You can take advantage of Windows Azure by extending those apps into the cloud. With Windows Azure, you can scale out your app to multiple instances to handle unpredictable usage. You can also connect with on-premises Active Directory or integrate using Windows Azure Virtual Networks. By extending your infrastructure, you get the best of both worlds by leveraging existing assets and new capabilities in the cloud. Another way to utilize virtual machines is for dev and test. Anyone that creates custom applications needs a dev and test environment. Developers need specific tools installed, while the test environment must replicate the world in which the new application will be deployed. Given the cost and time required to provision physical servers, it's become common to use virtual machines to do this. And with Windows Azure, you can basically log into the Windows Azure Management Portal and create virtual machines using Windows Azure Infrastructure Services, and you can supply your own VM images or use VHDs provided by Windows Azure. And remember, we support both Windows Server and Linux. Once these virtual machines exist, developers can use them to build and test a new application, customizing the VMs as they see fit. And why would you want to do this? Low cost and speed. Windows Azure VMs are available to users in a few minutes versus deploying them in your own data center, which can take days or weeks. Also, an organization would typically pay for VMs by the hour. With the cloud and Windows Azure, you're only paying for what you use. So again, you're getting great cost efficiencies. And lastly, you get a gallery of images to readily choose from, like Windows Server, SQL Server, and various Linux distributions. All of this makes Windows Azure a great platform for doing dev and test. You can also build websites with Windows Azure Websites. This is a platform as a service solution, and it's great if you want to quickly build and deploy new sites, do dev and test, or migrate an existing site that's already in production. Windows Azure Websites has support for great features like custom domains, SSL, auto-scaling, and provides an SLA on single standard instances. You can create new applications from scratch or deploy existing ones built in ASP.NET, PHP, Python, or Node.js. It's that flexible. It's also very scalable, making it easy for you to scale up your site to larger instances or scale out to multiple ones. And finally, it's secure with enterprise-grade availability with support for SSL and Active Directory authentication, making it possible to build applications for business workloads. Next is mobile. With Windows Azure Mobile Services, you can easily and quickly build cross-platform mobile apps that scale. Mobile Services provides a turnkey solution for storing data in the cloud, authenticating users, sending push notifications, and adding server-side business logic. By allowing you to leverage the full suite of Windows Azure services, including Active Directory, Service Bus, and websites, as well as Microsoft's global network of data centers, Mobile Services is perfect for both consumer-facing apps that respond to variable demand and employee-facing apps that require high availability and enterprise-grade security. And finally, we have Windows Azure Media Services. This is a platform-level service that enables developers to build solutions for ingesting, processing, managing, and delivering media content. This is built on top of the infrastructure of Windows Azure and IaaS Media Services. You have access to both Microsoft and third-party technologies that are curated, ready to use, and integrated into a single platform, simplifying the creation of end-to-end media solutions. Windows Azure has had great momentum. We have more than half of Fortune 500 companies using Windows Azure, and we're doubling compute and storage capacity every 6 months. To put it into perspective, in the 2 minutes it takes to brew yourself a cup of coffee, Windows Azure Active Directory has already processed over 1 million authentications from many devices and users around the world. These are some of the customers that have used Windows Azure and have had great success with it. And part of the reason why they've invested in our platform is that they trust us. Windows Azure represents our massive investment in the cloud and takes advantage of our experience in the industry. Today, we run some of the largest global services securely and efficiently, such as Bing or Office 365. And we run over 200 global services 24/7 with these stats to show you how large-scale and global our operations are. You can rest assured that security and operational efficiency is at our core. The other concern that you might have is resiliency. With Windows Azure, everything is designed to fail because resources are plentiful. This means that we can take a different approach when building applications. We all know that any part of your app can fail, but if your web server tier fails, we want to make sure that your application can keep on working. How you do this is by having multiple instances of your web tier. Any of these copies can fail, but Windows Azure can make sure that it detects and recovers from these failures by spinning up a new instance. The platform also makes sure that your application instances are separated across redundant parts of the underlying physical infrastructure. In Windows Azure, we call these fault domains. Using Windows Azure Storage as an example, if you give a file to Windows Azure, it saves that file 3 times in 3 different fault domains. If any copies of the file fail, the platform creates another copy. With this, we make sure that your data is always safe when you store it in Windows Azure. So in summary, I hope you enjoyed learning about Windows Azure and the different ways you can use it for developing your apps. Today we looked at the benefits of Windows Azure, such as time to market, being able to deploy and develop your apps quickly, being open and flexible, having support for many languages, tools, and frameworks, and economics, being able to achieve great cost efficiencies by using Windows Azure. We looked at the different ways you could use Windows Azure, such as extending your infrastructure, dev and test, building websites, mobile apps, or media solutions. You can learn more and get started by signing up for a free trial at windowsazure.com. Thanks for watching. I hope you found that useful. You can sign up for a free trial of Windows Azure at windowsazure.com and start taking advantage of the cloud today.